The galaxy was vast and filled with wonders, billions of stars, each orbited by planets teeming with life, history, and diversity. And yet, in this immeasurable expanse, one species had remained a curious enigma to the galactic community: humans. They had entered the interstellar stage late by most accounts. When other civilizations had achieved faster-than-light travel, humanity had still been splitting the atom and debating whether reaching their moon was a worthy endeavor. By the time the rest of the galaxy extended its hand in welcome, humans were barely out of their planetary cradle. And yet, within a century, they caught up. Humans, as everyone soon learned, had an uncanny ability to adapt, innovate, and grow. Their relatively short lifespans fueled a kind of desperation to achieve that most long-lived species found baffling. Other civilizations took millennia to evolve their technologies, their cultures, their philosophies. Humans did it in centuries or even decades, racing ahead as though the universe itself was chasing them. Despite this, they were strangely, polite, almost meek. Where other species flaunted their strengths, humans always seemed to downplay theirs. They were generous in trade agreements, collaborative in joint projects, and quick to mediate disputes, even when they stood little to gain. If they ever boasted, it was about things most species found mundane: art, music, the way sunlight looked on autumn leaves. But there was one thing humans said often, too often, that no one truly understood: "Please don't make us mad." It became a joke among the elder races. The Urathi, who prided themselves on their ancient diplomacy, found it amusing. The Zaurek, with their warlike tendencies, saw it as an idle threat. The Akalni, intellectuals who believed reason always triumphed over emotion, dismissed it as a cultural quirk. What could humans possibly mean by that? Make them mad? What would happen? Would they raise their voices, stamp their feet? It was hard to take seriously from a species whose contributions to galactic history were, thus far, peaceful. And then came the Kalrak. The Kalrak were unlike any other species. They weren't diplomats or scientists or traders. They were conquerors, plain and simple. Their empire spanned hundreds of systems, each one stripped of its resources, its inhabitants enslaved or exterminated. To the Kalrak, strength was the only currency worth trading. Weakness was to be exploited, and humanity, with its soft words and constant pleas for peace, seemed the weakest of all. The first attack was swift and brutal. Without warning, the Kalrak fleet descended upon Earth's system, bypassing the outlying colonies and striking directly at the human homeworld. Their ships, enormous and bristling with weaponry, blotted out the stars as they positioned themselves in orbit. A single message was broadcast to Earth, translated into every known human language: "Kneel or die." The galaxy watched in grim anticipation. The Urathi offered their condolences to the humans' ambassadors, prepared to welcome them as refugees when their planet inevitably fell. The Zolrek scoffed, muttering that humanity had brought this on themselves by refusing to build a proper military. The Akalni remained silent, watching with clinical detachment. After all, they reasoned, it was simply the nature of the universe for the strong to dominate the weak. For 24 hours, humanity said nothing. No response, no counterattack, just silence. The Kalrak assumed this was fear. Perhaps the humans were scrambling to negotiate terms of surrender, or perhaps they were too stunned to react at all. It didn't matter. The Kalrak began their invasion, deploying ground forces to Earth's surface, while their orbital fleet targeted major cities. And then, on the 25th hour, humanity responded. The transmission was brief, broadcast not just to the Kalrak but to every corner of the galaxy. It was a simple, chilling message. "We told you, please, don't make us mad." What happened next defied comprehension. The Kalrak fleet, vast and invincible, disintegrated. There was no explosion, no exchange of fire, just silence and then nothing. Ships the size of small moons crumbled as though reality itself had rejected them. Soldiers on the ground reported seeing their weapons malfunction, their armor disintegrating as they fled in terror. Entire battalions vanished without a trace, and all the while, humanity remained silent. The galaxy was thrown into chaos. No one understood what had happened. Had humanity developed some new weapon, some unimaginable technology capable of erasing an entire fleet in moments? Theories abounded. Perhaps it was a superweapon hidden on Earth and triggered as a last resort. Perhaps it was some kind of experimental AI programmed to eliminate threats with surgical precision. Some even whispered that humanity had made a deal with forces beyond understanding, trading their souls for power. The truth, as it turned out, was far simpler and far more terrifying. For centuries, humans had restrained themselves. Their history was one of conflict, of war and violence on scales that other species found horrifying. Before they ever reached the stars, they had nearly destroyed themselves countless times. Nuclear war, biological weapons, artificial intelligence. Humanity had stared into the abyss and time and again pulled back at the last moment. They had learned, through pain and loss, the cost of their own rage. And so they had built their society on restraint, on cooperation, on peace, not because they were weak, but because they knew what they were capable of. But the Calrac had pushed too far. They had threatened not just humanity's survival, but its very existence. And so humanity had lifted its self-imposed restraints. The technologies they had hidden away, the weapons they had sworn never to use, were unleashed. The galaxy learned, too late, why humans had begged them not to make them mad. The Calrac Empire fell within days. Their fleets were obliterated, their homeworld left untouched but isolated, its rulers forced to watch as their dominion crumbled around them. The survivors spoke of horrors they couldn't comprehend. Ships that moved faster than light without leaving a trace, weapons that bent time and space, soldiers who appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Humanity didn't conquer the Calrac, they dismantled them. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. Humanity issued no ultimatums, made no demands. They transmitted one final message to the galaxy. We value peace above all else. But if peace is impossible, we will do what we must to ensure it. Please, don't make us mad again. The galaxy was silent in the wake of humanity's warning. The Calrac, once the most feared empire in the known universe, was reduced to a shadow of its former self. Other civilizations, even the mighty Urathi and the warlike Zalrek, found themselves reevaluating their understanding of humanity. What else had they hidden? What other horrors lay dormant, waiting to be unleashed? Humanity, for its part, returned to its quiet existence. They rebuilt the cities that had been damaged in the attack, mourned the lives that had been lost, and resumed their role in the galactic community. They offered aid to the Calrac refugees, helped mediate disputes between other species, and continued their relentless pursuit of knowledge and progress. But the galaxy would never forget what had happened. The phrase that had once been a joke, a curious idiom, now carried a weight that chilled even the bravest hearts. Please don't make us mad. The aftermath of the Calrac invasion was something the galaxy had never experienced before. Civilizations across the stars were left grappling with the impossible. How a species like humanity, seen as a junior partner in the galactic order, could wield such catastrophic power. The Calrac were gone, their empire dismantled with almost surgical precision. No planet glassed, no cities leveled, but their fleets, their armies, their ability to wage war, all erased as though they had never existed. It was an outcome no one had imagined, and it left a vacuum of fear and awe. Across the galactic community, whispers filled the halls of power. Diplomats convened in secret, militaries adjusted their contingency plans, and scientists began combing through centuries of human history, desperate to find clues about what they might have missed. Humanity itself, meanwhile, seemed oddly unaffected by the galaxy's reaction. So, Earth and its colonies began rebuilding. The damage caused by the initial Calrac assault was significant, but humans treated it with a grim efficiency that unnerved their allies. Entire cities were reconstructed in weeks, fleets replenished in months. The galaxy had seen humanity's ingenuity in action before, but this was something else entirely. It was as though they were preparing, not just recovering, and they did so with a quiet, almost serene resolve. In the months following the war, the Urathii sent a delegation to Earth. Led by High Counselor Vareth, the mission's purpose was clear: to understand what had happened and, if possible, to ensure it never happened again. The Urathii were a species that prided themselves on their neutrality and logic. They were respected as mediators and scholars, often called upon to resolve disputes between warring factions. But even they felt a tremor of unease as their delegation descended through Earth's atmosphere, their sleek diplomatic vessel gliding over cities that were already teeming with life again. Aerith had expected to find a planet still reeling from trauma. What she found instead was disconcerting. Humans walked the streets with a sense of normalcy, their laughter and chatter filling the air as though nothing had happened. Yet beneath their smiles, there was something else. A tension, a quiet vigilance. The delegation was greeted warmly, as they always were, but the hospitality felt different this time. Politeness had always been a hallmark of human culture, but now it carried an undercurrent of firmness, a silent reminder that Earth was no longer a place to take lightly. As Vareth and her aides were escorted to a grand hall in one of Earth's restored cities, she couldn't shake the feeling that every step was being watched, measured, and analyzed. The meeting began with pleasantries, as these things always did. The humans offered their gratitude for the support of the galactic community, sparse though it had been. They assured the Urathii delegation that humanity held no ill will toward the galaxy for its initial hesitance to intervene. But when Vareth delicately broached the subject of what had transpired during the conflict, the room seemed to grow colder. "No. You're asking about the Calrac," said Minister Alden Kane, humanity's representative. He was a tall man with sharp features and eyes that seemed to pierce through Vareth's carefully composed demeanor. "Not just the Calrac," Vareth replied cautiously. "We are asking about what your people unleashed upon them." "The galaxy has questions, Minister Kane. There is concern, genuine concern, about what occurred." Alden leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. For a moment he said nothing, his gaze fixed on Vareth as though deciding how much to say. Finally he spoke. "The galaxy has long underestimated humanity," he began. "We know this. We've heard the jokes, seen the dismissive glances. We've been called many things: reckless, primitive, emotional, and maybe, in some ways, those assessments aren't entirely wrong. But what the galaxy fails to understand is what shaped us." He paused, his voice steady but carrying an edge that made Vareth's spine stiffen. "We are a species forged in conflict. Before we ever left our planet, we fought wars that could have destroyed us. We've stared into the abyss more times than we can count, and every time we've found a way back. But those experiences taught us something vital, something we've carried with us into the stars." Fear reflexively scanned the screen. Vareth's aide shifted uncomfortably, their data pads flickering with notes. She held up a hand, signaling them to stay silent. "And what is that, Minister?" she asked. "We are our own greatest threat," Eldon replied. "We understood early on that our potential for destruction far exceeded our wisdom, so we made a choice. We created limiters, self-imposed rules, technologies, and safeguards to ensure that we wouldn't destroy ourselves. And when we joined the galactic community, we extended those limiters outward, not because we feared you, but because we feared what we might do to you." Vareth blinked, her composure slipping for just a moment. And during the Kalrak invasion? We lifted them, Alden said simply. For the first time in centuries, we allowed ourselves to act without restraint, not out of vengeance, not out of malice, but because the Kalrak gave us no choice. They threatened our existence, and we responded accordingly. The room fell silent, the weight of his words pressing down on everyone present. What you witnessed, Alden continued, was only a fraction of what we are capable of. And that's why we warned you. Please, don't make us mad. It wasn't a threat, it was a plea. For your sake, not ours. Virith struggled to find a response. The implications of what Alden was saying were staggering. If humanity's actions against the Kalrak were only a fraction of their potential, then what lay hidden beneath their carefully maintained facade of peace? And now, she asked finally, now that the Kalrak are no longer a threat, what happens to these limiters? They've been reinstated, Alden said. What we did was necessary, but it's not who we want to be. We value peace above all else. That hasn't changed. But understand this. If we are pushed again, if another threat arises that forces us to lift those limiters once more, we won't hesitate. The meeting concluded shortly after, leaving Virith and her delegation to digest what they had learned. As their ship ascended back into orbit, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had taken root in her mind. Humanity's warnings were no longer a curiosity or a joke. They were a reality, a terrifying, sobering reality. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy began to shift. The great powers, once so confident in their dominance, tread more carefully in their dealings with humanity. Treaties were renegotiated, trade agreements amended to favor Earth and its colonies. Even the warlike Zalric, who had once scoffed at human weakness, began withdrawing their forces from disputed territories near human space. And through it all, humanity watched. They returned to their research, their art, their exploration of the stars. They extended hands of friendship to those who sought it and offered aid to those in need. But the galaxy never forgot the message they had broadcast after the Kalrak's fall. We value peace above all else, but if peace is impossible, we will do what we must to ensure it. Please, don't make us mad again. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a boast. It was a truth that the galaxy could no longer afford to ignore. The galaxy settled into a tense equilibrium in the aftermath of the Kalrak Empire's collapse. The sweeping changes that followed humanity's unrestrained response rippled outward, touching every corner of known space. Entire species began reevaluating their relationships with one another, their political alliances shifting like tectonic plates in response to a power they now barely understood. Humanity, to the galaxy's relief and mild confusion, seemed content to return to its former role as a cooperative and relatively quiet member of the interstellar community. But that quiet was unnerving now. It wasn't the humility of a junior species learning its place in a vast and ancient cosmos. It was the quiet of a predator choosing not to hunt. For many species, this newfound tension bred paranoia. It was whispered in the halls of power and debated in clandestine meetings. Could humanity truly be trusted? Was their restraint genuine or merely a facade? The galaxy had seen what they were capable of when provoked. What if their wrath could be triggered again, not by conquest or invasion, but by something smaller, an insult, a perceived slight, or even a misunderstanding? It was the Akalni who decided to test the waters. The Akalni prided themselves on being a species of reason, devoted to understanding the universe through logic and scientific rigor. They had been among the first to dismiss humanity's warnings as little more than cultural quirks, but after the fall of the Kalrak, their curiosity was piqued. The Akalni did not act out of hostility, but from a belief that all things could be understood, cataloged, and, if necessary, controlled. They began their investigations subtly at first. Their scientists sought to uncover the nature of the human limiters, combing through every scrap of data from the Kalrak conflict. They studied the aftermath, analyzing the energy signatures left behind by destroyed Calrac ships, the peculiar anomalies in space where entire fleets had disappeared. The results were inconclusive, frustratingly so. The readings defied known physics, suggesting forces and technologies that even the Achalni, with their superior intellects, could not comprehend. As weeks turned into months, the Achalni grew bolder. Covert probes were dispatched to monitor human systems, their stealth technologies advanced enough to evade most forms of detection. Or so they believed. The probes observed Earth and its colonies from the shadows, recording everything from ship movements to planetary defenses. The Achalni believed they were being thorough, careful. What they failed to understand was that humanity had learned to see shadows long before they ever reached the stars. The first probe was destroyed quietly. A pulse of energy rendered it instantiation, rendered it inert. Its data wiped clean before it could transmit its findings. The Achalni dismissed the loss as an anomaly, a technical failure. But when the second probe met the same fate, and the third, they began to suspect otherwise. Unwilling to admit defeat, the Achalni escalated. They deployed a team of operatives to infiltrate a human research facility on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. The facility was known to house cutting-edge experiments, many of which were tightly classified. If humanity's secrets were hidden anywhere, the Achalni reasoned, it would be there. The mission did not go as planned. The operatives were discovered before they even breached the outer perimeter. How humanity detected them remained a mystery. The Achalni operatives had been equipped with the best cloaking technologies available, their movements planned down to the millisecond. Yet, as they approached the facility, they were met by a contingent of human security forces, their weapons raised but unfired. "You shouldn't be here," the human commander said simply, his voice calm but carrying an edge that froze the operatives in place. The Achalni were detained, questioned, and eventually returned to their homeworld with an unmistakable message. Humanity knew what they were doing and had chosen, for now, to let them go. This act of leniency sent shockwaves through the Achalni leadership. It wasn't the capture of their operatives that unsettled them, nor the failure of their probes. It was the way humanity had handled the situation, with a patience and restraint that bordered on unsettling. The humans hadn't retaliated, hadn't issued demands or ultimatums. They had simply stopped the Achalni's efforts with an almost casual ease, as though they were swatting away an annoying insect. But the most chilling detail came from the operatives themselves. Each of them reported the same thing. During their detainment, they had been watched, not just by the human guards, but by something else, something they couldn't describe. They spoke of an overwhelming presence, an intelligence that seemed to fill the air around them, observing their every thought and movement. The Achalni, for all their logic and reason, began to question whether they had stumbled onto something far greater than they had anticipated. Elsewhere in the galaxy, other species took note of the Achalni's failure. The Urathii, who had long advocated for caution in dealing with humanity, used the incident as a warning. "We have seen what happens when they are provoked," High Counselor Vereth said in a closed session of the Galactic Assembly. "Do not mistake their silence for passivity. Humanity has made their position clear. They seek peace, but they are prepared for war. War unlike anything we can comprehend." The Zalrek, meanwhile, saw an opportunity. Their warlike nature made them view humanity not as a threat, but as a challenge. The idea of a species capable of dismantling the Calrac was intoxicating to them. Surely, they reasoned, if the humans could be provoked into a confrontation, it would reveal the true extent of their power. Zalrek warships began appearing near human space, their movements deliberate but just shy of overt aggression. It was a game they had played with other species before, a show of force meant to provoke a reaction. But humanity did not respond in the way the Zalrek expected. Instead of mobilizing their fleets, the humans sent a single ship to the disputed zone. It was small, unassuming, and unarmed, or so it seemed. The Zalrek commander, confident in his superiority, hailed the vessel. "Do you come to surrender, human?" he sneered, his image towering over the human captain on the view screen. The human captain, a woman with an expression of calm that bordered on indifference, replied with a single sentence. "We came to observe." Before the Zalrek commander could respond, his flagship was disabled. Not destroyed, not even damaged. Simply off. Every system, from weapons to life support, ceased functioning in an instant. The other ships in his fleet experienced the same fate, their crews left powerless as the human vessel drifted through the formation like a shark swimming among minnows. The message was clear. Humanity did not need to fight to win. In the days that followed, the Zalrek withdrew their forces, their leaders issuing a public statement of respect for humanity's strength. Privately, however, they were shaken. They had seen the Calrac fall, but experiencing humanity's power firsthand was something else entirely. Across the galaxy, the incident only reinforced what many already feared. Humanity's limiters were not simply technological safeguards, they were a choice, a deliberate restraint exercised by a species that could, if it wished, dominate them all. And yet, humanity remained steadfast in its pursuit of peace. They reached out to the Akalni, offering to share some of their scientific advancements under strict terms of cooperation. They extended an olive branch to the Zalrek, proposing joint military exercises to foster trust. To the Urathi, they offered their gratitude, acknowledging the High Counselor's wisdom in urging caution. But beneath the surface, the galaxy knew the truth. Humanity's warnings were no longer just words. They were a reality that could not be ignored. "Please," the humans had said, time and again, "don't make us mad." The galaxy had learned, too late, what those words truly meant, and it would not forget.